What if everything you thought you knew about the royal family was a lie? What if the son who has always been hailed as the future king of England isn't even the biological child of the man he calls his father? Imagine the shock, the betrayal, the heartbreak. This isn't a tabloid rumor, and it isn't some wild conspiracy theory whispered in the shadows. This is the revelation that has shattered the royal household to its core. Confirmed by a secret DNA test and a letter Princess Diana wrote before her death. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Kate Middleton, the poised and graceful Duchess of Cambridge, was reportedly found in tears after receiving the confirmation. Behind palace walls, far away from the cameras and public scrutiny, the weight of this truth hit her like a tidal wave. How do you process a secret that changes the very history of the monarchy? How do you comfort a future king who has lived his entire life under a false assumption, and a prince who suddenly must confront a shocking new identity? The story begins decades ago, with Diana, Princess of Wales, navigating a marriage that was fraught with tension, public scrutiny, and private heartbreak. Her instincts told her there was a truth the world needed to know, a truth so explosive that it had to be kept hidden until the right moment. Now, that moment has arrived. And the revelations are even more devastating than anyone could have anticipated. What's inside Diana's final letter? How did the secret DNA test come to light after all these years? And why did it take so long for the world, and Kate Middleton, to learn the truth? There are whispers of palace conspiracies, staff who knew and never spoke, and decades of hidden tension between the brothers, William and Harry, that now make sense in a way no one ever imagined. The implications are enormous. This isn't just about family drama. It's about power, legacy, and the very line of succession to the throne. And as the story unfolds, the public will be forced to grapple with questions they never expected to ask. How much do we really know about those we trust the most? And what happens when the truth finally comes to light? But the most shocking part of all, what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if a single test could rewrite centuries of royal history? That's exactly what happened when a DNA test, long buried in palace archives, was finally unearthed. It wasn't a casual blood check or a routine medical exam. This was a highly secretive, meticulously documented test conducted decades ago, with results so explosive that only a handful of people even knew it existed. And now, for the first time, the truth is coming to light. The discovery of the test wasn't an accident. An investigative historian, digging through archived royal documents, stumbled upon a series of sealed envelopes marked with Diana's handwriting and coded notes referencing truths to be revealed. Inside was the DNA test, along with commentary that hinted at what Diana had feared the world might never understand. Imagine opening a file that could upend the image of the monarchy you've always believed in. That's exactly what happened to those who first handled the document. The results were clear. The DNA test confirmed what Diana had long suspected and carefully documented in her personal letters. Prince Harry was not the biological son of King Charles. The implications were staggering. For decades, Harry had been raised under the assumption that he was the son of the reigning monarch, his identity intertwined with royal legacy and expectation. Suddenly, all of that certainty vanished. How does one confront a life built on a lie? And how does a family maintain unity when such a fundamental truth is exposed? Kate Middleton's reaction to the discovery was immediate and deeply emotional. Sources inside the palace described a private moment of sheer heartbreak as the Duchess realized the enormity of the secret she now carried. It wasn't just a shocking revelation. It was a seismic shift in the understanding of family, identity, and loyalty. She had to grapple with the fallout for her husband, Prince William, the heir apparent, and for the royal family's image as a whole. But the DNA test was only part of the story. It confirmed the biological truth, yes, but it also opened the door to questions that had been unanswered for years. Who else knew? Who had been keeping this secret, and why? And most importantly, what had Diana intended by documenting it? Every answer seemed to lead to deeper, more unsettling questions. The palace may have attempted to bury the secret, but as with all truths, it eventually clawed its way to the surface. And when it did, the consequences would reach far beyond private heartbreak, affecting titles, public perception, and the future of the monarchy itself. But what came next would push the revelation even further, into a private letter written by Diana herself, a letter that would change the story from shocking to unthinkable. Imagine holding a letter in your hands, knowing it was written by one of the most famous women in the world, and realizing it contains a secret that could shake an entire monarchy. That's exactly what happened when Diana's final letter was finally made public. Written just weeks before her tragic death, the letter was intimate, raw, and startlingly honest. Within its pages, Diana revealed the truth she had carried alone for years, a truth that no one outside her closest circle had ever seen. The letter wasn't a casual note or a diary entry. It was carefully composed, with purpose and precision, yet brimming with emotion. Every word seemed to weigh heavily, as if Diana knew that the moment she put pen to paper, she was creating a record for the ages. She acknowledged the impossibility of the life she lived, the pressures of royalty, and the difficult choices she had made to protect her children and the monarchy from truths they were not ready to face. And then came the revelation. Diana confirmed, in no uncertain terms, that Harry was not Charles's biological son. Her words were both gentle and devastating, written not to scandalize but to preserve honesty and clarity for the future. She described her fears for Harry, her love for him, and the complicated web of relationships that had led to this secret being kept for so long. Reading the letter is like witnessing a private confession from someone who lived under constant scrutiny, someone who bore the weight of the world while trying to shield her children. The discovery of the letter sent shockwaves through the palace. Staff who had known of its existence described feeling a mix of fear, awe, and guilt. Fear of the consequences, awe at Diana's courage, and guilt for having kept the secret. The letter added a deeply personal, emotional dimension to the cold, scientific proof of the DNA test. It wasn't just evidence. It was a mother's voice speaking across decades, pleading for understanding and truth. Kate Middleton, upon seeing the letter, reportedly broke down completely. She had spent years navigating palace protocols, public appearances, and her own private challenges. But nothing could have prepared her for the realization that this secret had been hiding in plain sight, carefully documented by the woman who had once been called the People's Princess. She wasn't just mourning the revelation. She was mourning the burden Diana had carried alone, the unspoken pain that had shaped her children's lives in ways no one could have imagined. And yet, the letter was more than a confession. It was a clue, a puzzle piece pointing to deeper questions. How did Charles respond to this knowledge? What did William know, and when? And perhaps most importantly, what did Harry himself think when confronted with the truth? The answers were hidden, waiting to unfold, but one thing was clear. The revelation of Diana's final letter would not just shock the world, it would redefine it. But what came next would bring the focus directly to Harry and the personal storm he was about to face. What do you do when the life you've always known suddenly collapses beneath you? That's the reality Prince Harry faced the moment Diana's letter and the secret DNA test came to light. For a man who had lived under the public gaze since birth, whose every action was scrutinized by the world, this revelation wasn't just shocking, it was earth-shattering. Harry had spent decades identifying himself in relation to his father, to the monarchy, and to the expectations that came with being a prince. Now, that foundation had vanished. From the outside, Harry's life had always seemed privileged, glamorous, and controlled. But behind palace walls, he had endured a childhood of tension, confusion, and suspicion. Friends and insiders have hinted for years that Harry sensed something was off, a quiet unease he couldn't articulate. He grew up loving his father, striving to be a son worthy of approval, yet feeling a subtle distance he could never fully explain. Suddenly, that distance made sense, and it also brought a tidal wave of emotions that he had been unprepared to handle. The identity crisis was immediate and deeply personal. How do you reconcile love and loyalty with the knowledge that your biological history is different from what you believed? Harry reportedly wrestled with feelings of betrayal, anger, and grief. The man he had admired and called Dad for his entire life was now the subject of questions he could barely process. And yet, there was also a rush of understanding, a clarity that explained long-standing tensions and whispered insecurities. But understanding doesn't erase heartbreak, it magnifies it. This revelation also strained Harry's relationships with those closest to him. The bond with his brother, William, suddenly carried new weight. The years of shared childhood experiences, triumphs, and heartbreaks had to be re-examined through the lens of this secret. For Harry, it was not just an identity crisis. It was a test of family loyalty and trust. Could he forgive the lies, or would the truth create an irreparable chasm? And then there was the public eye. Harry knew that once this truth emerged, it would dominate headlines, social media, and public debate. He had always struggled with media intrusion, yet now he faced a storm that no level of privacy could contain. Every personal reflection, every emotional reaction would be dissected, analyzed, and sensationalized. How do you maintain your dignity when the world is watching your most intimate heartbreak? But perhaps the most painful aspect was the realization that this secret had shaped the very essence of his life. Every achievement, every relationship, every role within the monarchy had been influenced by a lie he could no longer ignore. And as Harry began to confront this reality, the question loomed: how would he respond? And what would he do next to reclaim his identity in a world that suddenly seemed unrecognizable? The next chapter would turn to Kate Middleton, whose own grief and shock would reveal just how deeply this secret had shaken the future of the monarchy. What happens when the weight of the world collides with personal heartbreak? That's exactly what Kate Middleton experienced when she learned the full truth about Prince Harry's parentage. For the Duchess of Cambridge, poised and composed in public, this revelation was a private tsunami of emotion. Sources inside the palace describe her breaking down in tears behind closed doors, away from cameras and reporters, as the reality of Diana's secret and the DNA test sank in. Kate has always been the image of grace under pressure. She navigates royal protocol, public appearances, and international scrutiny with remarkable composure. But this was different. This was not a crisis of etiquette, diplomacy, or media spin. This was personal, intimate, and heart-wrenching. Suddenly, she was not just a wife and mother. She was the keeper of a secret that could redefine the monarchy and fracture a family. Every thought of Prince William, of the future of their children, and of the legacy of Princess Diana weighed heavily on her mind. The moment reportedly began with a private briefing from palace aides, who revealed the contents of Diana's letter and the results of the DNA test. Imagine the scene. Kate, sitting in a quiet room, hearing that Harry is not the biological son of King Charles. The shock, the disbelief, the sorrow. She had to process not only the implications for Harry, but also for William, her husband, the heir to the throne, and for the institution they both represent. The stakes were enormous, far beyond what most of us could imagine. Her tears weren't just for Harry. They were for the family as a whole. The burdens of secrecy, the weight of legacy, and the hidden pain Diana had carried alone for years. Kate reportedly struggled with a mixture of empathy, frustration, and determination. How do you support a brother-in-law through this revelation? How do you comfort your husband, who is suddenly forced to reconcile the past with the present? And how do you maintain a public image when your private world is unraveling? The emotional intensity didn't stop there. Staff members who witnessed Kate's reaction described a scene of raw humanity, a woman caught between love, loyalty, and the unbearable pressure of royal life. It was a reminder that even in the gilded halls of royalty, grief and shock are universal, inescapable, and deeply human. But Kate's heartbreak was only the beginning. The revelation set the stage for William's own silent struggle, a test of his loyalty, leadership, and ability to navigate a family secret that could redefine the monarchy itself.